Weirdness isn't always something to fear. Sometimes it's the very detail that pulls people closer, the kind of difference that refuses to be ignored. In the world of fame, perfection is often treated as a requirement, yet many black celebrities rose to prominence precisely because their bodies didn't fit familiar standards. Their appearances stood apart, not polished, not symmetrical, sometimes unsettling, sometimes fascinating but impossible to confuse with anyone else. These bodies, existing beyond traditional definitions of beauty, carried an undeniable presence. Some were shaped by rare biological conditions, others by injuries, genetics, or choices that altered them forever. Whether natural or altered, these physical differences became inseparable from their identities. They shaped confidence, insecurity, and how the world reacted to them long before talent was even acknowledged. This journey looks at 25 famous black individuals whose bodies were labeled bizarre and asks a quieter question beneath the spectacle: did these differences become a burden or a source of power? 25. Hound Dog Taylor. Hound Dog Taylor, a Chicago blues legend, was known for raw guitar work and a voice that felt unfiltered and dangerous. But before audiences heard a single note, they noticed his hands. Born with 6 fingers on each hand, Taylor carried a physical trait that set him apart from childhood. In an era when difference often invited suspicion, his hands drew stares, whispers, and uneasy assumptions. Some people even attached dark myths to them, treating the extra fingers as a sign of something unnatural. Growing up in the early 1930s, as blues poured out of crowded bars and street corners, those hands began to reveal something unexpected. On the guitar neck, the extra fingers weren't hidden, they were fully active. According to those who saw him play, his fretting and bends sounded sharper, more aggressive, almost unsettling. Some believed the unusual structure of his hands helped shape a sound that felt wild and tense, like it was constantly on the edge of breaking. By the 1960 essays, Taylor appeared more frequently on small Chicago stages. The 6 fingers became part of the legend. Under dim lights and thick smoke, he played with relentless intensity, as if every finger, extra or not, was fighting to be heard. What many once saw as a flaw slowly turned into an unmistakable signature. His body didn't push him out of music. It carved out a space that belonged only to him. 24. Antonio Alfonseca. Antonio Alfonseca built a long professional baseball career as a steady, durable pitcher, never the loudest name in the headlines, but often remembered for lasting at the highest level. Still, before many people talked about his ERA or his control, they talked about his body. Alfonseca was born with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 digits in total, an extremely rare condition that made him a magnet for curiosity from the moment he was old enough to lace up his shoes. In childhood, that difference reportedly invited non-stop stares, whispers, and assumptions about what kind of future a kid like that could even have. And when he began leaning into baseball in the 1980s, those extra digits didn't disappear. They were there in every practice, every grip, every landing. Some people claimed the added fingers changed how the ball felt in his hand, creating an odd edge, a grip that looked familiar but behaved slightly differently, making certain pitches harder to read. By the 1990s, when Alfonseca reached the pros, the digits story followed him into locker rooms and newspapers. At times, it seemed like the public noticed the hands and feet first, then remembered the skill second. Yet he kept pitching anyway, season after season, under the weight of being studied like a curiosity. The unusual body didn't remove him from the game. If anything, it forced him to carry his identity, openly accept it, absorb the noise, and keep throwing through it. 23. DJ Paul. DJ Paul helped shape the gritty southern rap sound as a co-founder of 3-6 Mafia, building influence that didn't need flashy approval to feel permanent. But his difference wasn't something revealed later in a documentary. It was there from birth. His right arm was severely affected by Erb's palsy, leaving it smaller, weaker, and harder to move normally. On that hand, there was also a slight extra finger detail, small but noticeable enough to draw attention. In early life, the limitation wasn't just visual, It affected daily tasks, simple grips, ordinary movements. And in the 1980s, growing up under pressure in tough environments, the difference reportedly hit his confidence in public spaces. It's easy to picture the quiet moments, a teenager pulling a sleeve down, adjusting his posture, trying to keep eyes from lingering too long. But the same pressure that could have broken him seemed to redirect him. Music became a place where the body mattered less than the mind, rhythms, choices, control. By the 1990s, as Southern hip-hop surge DJ, Paul went deep into the studio, relentless. The arm was still there, in every session, every board adjustment, every late night, an imbalance that, according to some people, fed a heavier emotional intensity into the sound he helped create. Over time, the public learned the truth, and the difference became part of the story, not a reason to dismiss him, but evidence of persistence. The weak arm didn't remove him from music. It became part of what made him impossible to mistake. 22. Dizzy Gillespie. Dizzy Gillespie didn't just play trumpet, he helped invent the language of bebop, turning jazz into something faster, sharper, and brilliantly unpredictable. But there was also a visual signature that stopped first-time audiences in their tracks. When he played, his cheeks ballooned outward in a way that looked almost unreal under stage lights. It was linked to a rare condition affecting his cheeks and throat, and over time it became more pronounced, more visible, more inseparable from the performance. Early on it reportedly wasn't as dramatic. But as the years passed, the cheeks grew larger whenever he blew into the horn, transforming his face mid-song like his body was physically wrestling with the music. During the jazz boom of the mid-1940s in crowded clubs and packed concert halls, that look became part of the myth. Some viewers felt a strange mix of curiosity and worry, as if each note came with a hidden cost. And many people claimed the unusual facial structure was tied to his explosive sound, intense, energized, impossible to imitate. What matters is this: Dizzy didn't hide it. Decade after decade, he kept playing in full view, letting the world witness the difference as part of the art. For him, the feature wasn't a shame, it became a landmark, proof that a legend can be built from what sets someone apart, not what makes them blend in. But as these stories stack up, the question sharpens. When a body becomes a headline, what gets lost behind the headline talent, or the person carrying it? 21. Salif Keita. Salif Keita became one of the most influential voices in modern African music, carrying Mali's sound far beyond its borders and into global arenas. His voice has always felt larger than geography, powerful, aching, unmistakable. But long before the world heard him sing, people noticed something else first. Keita was born with full-body albinism, very light skin, light hair, and eyes that were highly sensitive to light. In a traditional black community, that difference didn't read as unique. It was treated as a warning. According to reports, even relatives distanced themselves, and some people claimed the condition was viewed as a curse or a bad omen. From childhood, his body became a target for fear and superstition, turning everyday life into a corridor of stairs and quiet rejection. As he grew into the 1960s and began showing undeniable musical talent, the physical reality didn't get easier. Mali's harsh sun became a daily threat, and appearing in public meant enduring constant scrutiny. In that environment, music wasn't just an ambition. It was believed to be his refuge, the one place where his body didn't define the value of his presence. And over time, the isolation sharpened something in him. His voice carried more weight, more grit, as if every note was a response to being pushed to the edge. By the 1970s, when he left home to pursue professional singing, the same difference followed him onto stages. People didn't only listen. They watched. They stared. Whispers restarted under the lights. But Keita kept going. The body, once treated like a sign of misfortune, became part of a global legacy. And the question lingers beneath the applause: when the world finally called him a legend, did it ever fully let go of the prejudice that tried to erase him first? 20. Abdullah the Butcher. Abdullah the Butcher became a wrestling icon, not by looking polished, but by embracing fear as his brand. His matches were tied to a hardcore style that made audiences flinch because the damage didn't look staged. And the most unforgettable marker of that career was written directly on his forehead. Starting in the 1960s, Abdullah reportedly used razor blades to create real cuts for dramatic blood effect. Early on, the scars were noticeable, but not yet extreme. Over time, the pattern deepened. He continued the practice for years, match after match, until his forehead no longer looked like normal skin. Scars stacked on scars, grooves crossing over each other, creating a thick, uneven surface that some people compared to rough terrain. By the 1970s and 1980s, as he became notorious worldwide, the forehead had become inseparable from his image, part intimidation, part proof of the price he paid to keep crowds locked in. And he didn't try to erase it. No cosmetic reset. No attempt to return to normal. The scars remained as a living record of a career that turned the body itself into entertainment. It leaves an uneasy thought when an audience demands realism. Who pays for it when the lights go off? 19. Balaji Badejo. Balaji Badejo is remembered for giving physical form to one of cinema's most terrifying creatures, the alien in Alien. He didn't need a long filmography to become unforgettable. His body did the work quietly, unnervingly, perfectly. Badejo was extremely tall, around 6'10", but unusually thin, with long limbs, narrow shoulders, and a frame that seemed stretched beyond normal proportions. According to reports, he had Marfan syndrome, a genetic disorder that affects connective tissue and can result in unusual height and a slender build. In everyday life, that difference could make someone feel out of place. People stared. They assessed. They treated the body like a spectacle. But in England, in the late 1970s, the same difference suddenly became an answer to a casting problem. In 1978, filmmakers reportedly noticed him in a bar and recognized his natural silhouette as something no costume department could fabricate. Inside the alien suit, his movements looked slow, off-standard, and disturbingly alive, as if the creature wasn't acting but existing. Yet the role came with pressure. The heavy costume, tight spaces, and physical demands were believed to be punishing on a fragile frame. After Alien released in 1979 and became a phenomenon, the creature's image endured, but Badejo stepped away from acting, returning to a quieter life. It's the kind of story that feels like a file missing pages, a body discovered, used perfectly, then allowed to vanish from the narrative once the product was complete. 18. Yellow Man. Yellow Man became a defining figure in Jamaican dancehall. Bold stage presence, distinct voice, undeniable influence. But like Salif Keita, his earliest struggle began before music. He was born with full-body albinism, standing out sharply in sun-drenched Jamaica, where his skin and eyes were far more vulnerable to light. From childhood, his appearance drew intense scrutiny. According to reports, the prejudice wasn't limited to strangers. Even people close to him could treat the condition as taboo, tied to superstition and bad fate. When he began performing publicly in the 1970s, the sun itself became a constant threat, hours under heat and glare hitting skin that couldn't defend itself the same way. By the 1980s, as Yellowman rose in fame, the physical consequences became harder to hide. Reports said he developed skin cancer and underwent major surgeries that altered his jaw and mouth area, leaving his face visibly changed and his body thinner. Eating became difficult. Weight dropped. Each appearance became more shocking to the public, not because the music changed, but because the body now carried visible proof of survival. Still, he didn't disappear. He stayed in view, performing through the consequences, turning what many people labeled bizarre into something else: endurance. And by now the larger pattern is clearer. These aren't just stories about bodies. They're stories about how the world reacts when someone can't blend in, even when they're talented enough to become untouchable. So what happens when the spotlight loves the difference but never stops judging at 17? Lester Beetlejuice Green. Lester Green became a cultural phenomenon without fitting into any traditional idea of celebrity. His body alone stopped people mid-reaction. Born with microcephaly and severe dwarfism, his proportions were strikingly unusual, a very small headset on a short, stocky body. From early childhood, that difference meant his presence was rarely neutral. People stared, first reacted, second, and often never looked past the surface at all. Growing up, the physical condition reportedly made everyday life difficult. Movement, communication, and social interaction all came with added friction. Rumors followed him early on, not just about his size, but about his mind, as people speculated freely, often cruelly, about what his body meant. By the time he entered public entertainment spaces in the late 1980s and 1990s, the line between curiosity and exploitation had already blurred. Yet something unexpected happened. Instead of hiding, Lester leaned into visibility. His appearance became impossible to ignore, and over time, his reactions, humor, and personality began to eclipse the shock factor. The body that once isolated him became the doorway to recognition. Still, an uneasy question hangs in the background. When the audience laughs, are they laughing at the person or at the body that made them stop scrolling? 16. Manute Bol. Manute Bol entered professional basketball looking like something the sport had never seen. Standing over 7'7" tall with extremely long limbs and a very thin frame, his body defied expectations of strength and durability. On the court, he looked almost fragile, arms and legs, like stretched wire shoulders, narrow muscles, seemingly unable to catch up to his height. In his home region, that build wasn't considered strange. Among the Dinka people, tall and slender physiques were common. But once he stepped into the NB, surrounded by heavily built athletes, the contrast became stark. Fans often watched with a mix of awe and anxiety, holding their breath whenever he fell or collided, as if his body might snap under the weight of the game. Despite that perception, Bol became an elite shot blocker. His unusual frame created angles no one else could replicate. But reports suggested the same body that gave him reach also drained stamina and resilience over time. The difference made him unforgettable, but it also carried a cost that never fully showed up in highlight reels. 15. Victor Varnado. Victor Varnado grew up standing out before he ever spoke. Born with full-body albinism, his pale skin, light hair, and light, sensitive eyes made him immediately visible in black communities where difference often drew suspicion. From a young age, he reportedly faced rejection, teasing, and social distance, not for anything he did but for how his body appeared. Rather than retreat, Varnado leaned toward art and comedy spaces where difference could become perspective instead of punishment. Under stage lights harsh on albino skin, he stood anyway, letting visibility become part of the act. Over time, the body that once marked him as other transformed into something else, a visual signature that audiences remembered. The shift didn't erase the struggle. It reframed it. His presence quietly challenged the idea that identity has to look one specific way to belong. 14. Sean Ross. Sean Ross emerged in high fashion as something almost mythic. A black male model with albinism, his stark white skin, light hair, and sharp features created an image that felt unreal under runway lights. In neighborhoods and schools, that same body had once made him feel misplaced, like he belonged nowhere in particular. When fashion began searching for faces that broke rules instead of following them, Ross didn't just fit in. He disrupted the entire visual language. On runways in the early 2010 SE, his appearance created a striking contradiction: black heritage paired with ghostly pallor, softness mixed with sharp structure. Designers didn't know where to place him, which was exactly the point. What once made him feel invisible in daily life made him unforgettable in fashion. Still, the shift raises a quiet tension: was the industry embracing difference or simply consuming it because it looked new? 13. Seal. Seal's voice was never ordinary, but neither was his face. From a young age, he lived with discoid lupus, an autoimmune condition that caused severe scarring across his cheeks, forehead, and neck. The scars were deep-textured, impossible to hide. As a teenager, they became the first thing people noticed, often before they ever heard him sing. Early in his career, the scars drew uncomfortable attention. Some people reportedly assumed criminality or danger before knowing anything about him. But as his music reached global audiences, something shifted. The face once treated as shocking became iconic. The scars didn't soften the world adjusted around them. Seal didn't erase the difference. He stood under bright lights with it fully visible, pairing a scarred exterior with a voice capable of tenderness and power. It's one of the clearest examples of how a body labeled bizarre can eventually force the definition of beauty itself to expand, though never without resistance. And as these stories continue, a pattern sharpens. Difference attracts attention, but attention doesn't always mean understanding. So when the spotlight finally arrives, does it heal old wounds, or simply illuminate them? 12. Bushwick Bill. Bushwick Bill became one of the most unforgettable faces in American hip-hop, not despite his body, but in direct confrontation with it. Born with achondroplasia, dwarfism, his adult height remained just over 3 feet. His limbs were short and curved, his torso compact, his head larger in proportion, a body that drew attention before he ever spoke a lyric. Growing up, the stares came automatically. People underestimated him instantly, often reducing him to spectacle before talent ever entered the conversation. When street rap exploded in the late 1980s and early 1990s, Bushwick Bill stepped onto stages dominated by aggressive masculinity and physical presence. His appearance clashed sharply with expectations, and that clash became part of the impact. Standing small in stature but delivering fierce confrontational lyrics, he forced audiences to recalibrate how power could look. The body many saw as a weakness became a visual contradiction that amplified his intensity. Still, the pressure never disappeared. Each performance balanced pride against constant scrutiny, a reminder that visibility can empower and wound at the same time. 11. Cat Williams. Cat Williams' body has always felt slightly out of sync with his voice. Standing around 5'5" with a slim frame, narrow shoulders, and sharp facial features, his proportions appeared exaggerated under bright stage lights. Early in his career, that physical contrast became part of the comedy, a small body housing a rapid-fire delivery, explosive energy, and unapologetic aggression. As his fame grew, the body became inseparable from the persona. The size difference heightened the unpredictability. A figure that looked fragile at rest could suddenly dominate a room through sheer verbal force. Yet behind the performance, the scrutiny followed. Every movement, every expression, every shift in appearance became a point of public discussion. In comedy, especially where pain is often repackaged as humor, the line between control and exposure remained dangerously thin. 10. Tony Cox. Tony Cox built a long Hollywood career with a body the industry never quite knew how to place. Born with dwarfism, his adult height remained just over 3 feet. Short limbs, a stocky torso, and childlike proportions paired with an adult face created an immediate visual dissonance. On screen, that contrast was often used for humor before character. Early on, the body made blending in impossible. On sets filled with tall actors, every frame emphasized the difference. But instead of retreating, Cox leaned into the visibility. Over time, his presence became recognizable, even reliable. Still, there's an uneasy undertone to the roles he was often offered, proof that opportunity can arrive packaged with limitation, shaped by how much the industry is willing to see beyond the body. 9. Nelson de la Rosa. Nelson de la Rosa was once listed in the Guinness World Records as the world's smallest man. His height reportedly stopped at just under 30 inches, his body so small it shocked audiences wherever he appeared. From the late 1980s onward, his image traveled globally, often framed as curiosity first, human second. While the exposure opened doors in film and television, it also carried isolation. On sets and in public spaces, he was surrounded by bodies that dwarfed his own. The attention never turned off. Every step, every appearance demanded effort physically and mentally. De La Rosa passed away in 2006 at just 38 years old, leaving behind a legacy that raises a difficult question: when the world celebrates rarity, does it also carry responsibility for the cost of that attention? 8. Taye Diggs. Taye Diggs entered Hollywood with charm, voice, and presence, but also with a physical detail he worked hard to keep out of frame. He was born with extra fingers on both hands, a condition that subtly altered their shape. In childhood, the difference reportedly caused insecurity, especially in environments where appearance was constantly judged. As Diggs moved into acting and musical theater, the hands became something to manage camera angles, poses, wardrobe choices, all adjusted to minimize scrutiny. Eventually, he underwent surgery to remove the extra digits, aligning his appearance more closely with industry expectations. The change marked a turning point. It opened doors more easily, but it also revealed something uncomfortable: how many opportunities only exist once difference is erased. By now, the pattern is unmistakable. Some bodies were celebrated. Others were hidden. Some were turned into brands. Others into jokes. But in every case, the body came first, long before the talent was allowed to speak. So the question sharpens with each name added to the list. When success finally arrives, is it acceptance or just tolerance under better lighting? 7. J.J. Weaver. J.J. Weaver made his name in American college football through relentless defense and raw physical intensity. But long before scouts evaluated his speed or strength, attention lingered on his hands. Born with extra fingers, the difference was subtle but impossible to fully hide, especially in a sport where grip tackles and hand placement are constantly under scrutiny. From early practices to televised games, gloves had to be adjusted, wraps, thickened angles considered. Some doubted whether hands like his were built for elite-level football. Others quietly wondered if the difference might actually offer an advantage. According to reports, the extra digits altered how he gripped opponents, how he latched on during critical moments. What was once seen as a flaw slowly reframed itself as a functional edge. On the field, doubt gave way to impact. Still, the attention never fully shifted away from his body, a reminder that even performance doesn't always erase curiosity. 6. Louis Rankin. Louis Rankin, a commanding presence in reggae and dancehall culture, carried a visible difference from birth: 6 fingers on one hand. In many communities, such a trait didn't pass unnoticed. As a child, it attracted mockery and superstition, whispers about fate and bad signs. But Rankin never treated it as weakness. Instead, he carried the hand openly, even defiantly. According to people who knew him, if anyone pushed too far, he didn't hesitate to defend himself, sometimes using the very hand others mocked. As his music career grew in the 1990s, the extra finger became inseparable from his image. It wasn't hidden. It was displayed. The body difference merged with his tough, uncompromising persona, transforming what once drew ridicule into something closer to intimidation. In his case, visibility became armor. 5. DeAndre Forrest. DeAndre Forrest emerged in high fashion as one of the earliest black albino models to break into elite runway spaces. Her pale skin, light hair, and striking features clashed sharply with traditional beauty standards, not just mainstream ones, but those within black communities as well. Growing up, the difference reportedly brought bullying, rejection, and even violence. But Forrest didn't retreat. She entered an industry obsessed with visual extremes and forced it to look again. On the runway, under intense lights, her skin appeared almost luminous. What once made her a target became her signature. Designers didn't soften the contrast, they emphasized it, and the audience slowly adjusted. The shift didn't erase the pain that came before it, but it proved something unsettling. Sometimes acceptance only arrives once difference can be marketed. 4. Condon. Condon, an underground rapper and actor, was born with full albinism, pale skin paired with black features. Early in life, people assumed fragility. Family members reportedly discouraged physical activity, believing his body couldn't withstand strain. But adulthood told a different story. Over time, his body developed in sharp contrast to expectation. Broad shoulders, visible muscle, a powerful build wrapped in pale skin created an image that felt contradictory, almost confrontational. On stage and screen, the contrast was impossible to ignore. A body that looked breakable at first glance, then revealed strength on closer inspection. His appearance challenged assumptions from both directions that albinism meant weakness and that power had to look a certain way. 3. Wilma Rudolph. Wilma Rudolph's body once seemed to deny her a future in sports altogether. As a child, she survived polio, which left one leg weakened and deformed. Doctors reportedly told her she might never walk properly again. For years, she wore braces and relied on crutches. Running wasn't even a fantasy. But something shifted. Through relentless rehabilitation and training, the leg adapted. The brace came off. The limp faded. By her teenage years, Rudolph wasn't just walking, she was sprinting. The leg, once considered a permanent limitation, became part of a historic comeback. She went on to dominate Olympic tracks, rewriting not only records, but expectations about what a damaged body could become. At this point, the pattern has fully revealed itself. Some differences were erased. Others were amplified. Some became brands. Others became burdens carried quietly. But none of these bodies existed in a vacuum. They were watched, judged, shaped by reactions as much as by biology. And as we approach the final names, one question remains unresolved. When the world labels a body weird, is it really describing the body or its own discomfort with difference too? Cardi B. Cardi B became one of the most visible faces in modern hip-hop, and with that visibility came a level of scrutiny that never stays confined to music. Over the years, fans and tabloids repeatedly fixated on her changing proportions, especially the dramatic contrast between a very small waist and a much fuller lower body. In photos and red carpet clips, that shape was often treated like the headline itself, as if the body had to be explained before the work could be respected. According to reports and public conversations around her image, some of those changes were linked to cosmetic procedures that are common in celebrity culture. The problem wasn't only the procedures, it was the pressure system around them. When the spotlight rewards extremes, natural can start to feel like a risk, and every appearance turns into a test. Look too normal, and you're ignored. Look too different, and you're criticized. In Cardi's case, the public didn't just watch her career. They watched her body like it belonged to them. And that's the darker thread running under this entire list. Many of these people didn't choose to stand out. Some were born different. Some were shaped by illness, injury, or genetics. Others were pushed by a culture that treats bodies like products, something to upgrade, hide, exaggerate, or monetize. 1. The pattern behind the different. By the time we reach the end, the real story isn't just about unusual traits. It's about what happens when a body becomes a spectacle. Some individuals turned visibility into power, owning what made them stand apart and refusing to shrink under judgment. Others were forced to navigate an audience that stared first and understood later. And in the background, there's always a larger system at work: entertainment industries and social media cycles that reward shock, amplify insecurity, and turn personal appearance into public property. So when people call a celebrity's body weird, the question becomes unavoidable. Is the body truly the issue, or is it the world's discomfort with anyone who doesn't match a standard that was never fair to begin with? If you know someone whose life or personality mirrors this story, share their name in the